John Sleeman, welcome back to Paper Napkin Wisdom.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
You've brought some people with you.
I have. I'm very fortunate that my sons have agreed to join us for this conversation today. On my right is Quinn, who is a Cooper who makes whiskey barrels for us. And on my left is Cooper. I know that's confusing, but Cooper is the director of sales and marketing for us here at the distillery.
So was Quinn supposed to be the Cooper, or was Cooper supposed to be the Quinn?
It's a very long story. We'll have to have episode 4.
Okay. So look, in episode 1, first of all, if you haven't listened to all the episodes, go back and listen to episode 1. Part 1 of this series, we started off with starting a pub. Which sounds kind of innocuous, but then grew into something much bigger. And part 2, the napkin was, you've been given a gift, you better do something with it. And part 3 is, I need a new challenge. What does that mean?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, for those of you who were not listening to the first 2, I started with a pub. I started then into importing beer. Then I started the brewery, and then I got to a point where the brewery was part of a larger multinational corporation called Sapporo. I still maintain a lot of my shares in that business. I had been the chief operating officer, and I became the chairman with less day-to-day responsibility. And I enjoy building things. And the brewery was running and continues to run very well. We have professional people who know what they're doing. But I felt I was too young to do nothing, and I felt like I should get a new challenge. And our family has been in the beverage alcohol industry for its entire life. Our family likes whiskey. My wife loves vodka. And I thought, let's build a distillery.
Let's build a distillery.
Yeah.
Sounds like let's build a pub, let's build a brewery, let's just do it, right? So you had the vision for it. And did you see this when you saw the vision?
No, actually what I saw was a distillery that would be on an expressway that people would drive by every day, like the brewery. And they would fall in love with the idea of the Sleeman family getting in the whiskey business. We're now in an historic building that was itself a distillery in 1835 or 36, 1835, which I didn't know this building existed. Our family had spent over $250,000 developing the other site on the 401 in Cambridge. And one of my employees came to me and said, before you spend another dime, you should see this old building. And I remember in the early days coming here with Cooper and Quinn, and it was dilapidated. It was inhabited by rodents and homeless people. And it turns out under a hidden trap door was an old illicit still that apparently our family had something to do with. So it became apparent that we're going to put the distillery here. Cooper tells the story that he thinks I was crazy.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you should have seen the state of the building, right? Like it dilapidated for sure, but it's almost impossible to understand the vision that you would have had to have, right? Especially being already 3-4 steps down the path of a new build, purpose built, lots of, people driving by it and seeing it and going, no, we're going to change the plans. We're going to do it here. Where, there's evidence of fires that have happened. The ceilings collapsed in on itself. There's holes in the wall. There's no windows. There's water in the basement everywhere. It's like, what are we doing?
And you had plans. You had spent $250,000.
Yeah, the engineer drawings and finding land, et cetera. Like, we didn't break ground on anything. So we didn't turn away from the project per se.
So,
yeah.
I like how you said it became apparent. Cooper told me a slightly different story about how it became apparent.
It was a plan. Well, at least from Quinn and my perspective, it was hey, we found something cool that's connected to the family business. Let's go check it out. And by family business, I mean the historical side of the family business, the missing piece of the puzzle really associated with the Al Capone smuggling story. Where did that whiskey and new make whiskey that was caught on the truck, where did that come from? We never knew. Oh, we found it downtown. You should come check it out. This is great.
And this is what year?
2015.
So 2015.
In the winter, and it's freezing.
Okay. So this is 30 years after Aunt Florian gave the recipe book.
That's right.
Correct. And it's a trapdoor in the floor. It's right out of Pirates of the Caribbean, a brass ring. You pull back the tile, you climb down there. And Quinn and I go, oh, that's kind of cool. And my dad goes, we're building our distillery here, change of plans. And both of us looked at each other like, what are we talking about here? Like, this is crazy.
After like 10 years of going back and forth with different spots and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. And, I think it's a really great opportunity for us to continue to tell our story. Because I had somebody say to me, 6 months ago, give or take, that the world doesn't necessarily need another great whiskey. There's lots of fantastic whiskeys in the world. But right now, more so than ever, the world needs another good story. And this building really helps tell that story. What are the chances that we happen to find the illicit holding tanks and operation for distilling right around the time that we're thinking of opening up a distillery? And then, we pull everything off the walls and we find out this building was actually built as a distillery in 1835. Just by chance.
It's amazing, and it's also very cool that we're sitting in the room where the coopering happened, right? And Quinn, you did the coopering in here.
Initially this room was actually
set up. Unfortunately, the camera
we have a stage over
can't
there.
turn that way,
That
but we have a
stage
stage over there. That stage spanned about halfway through the
initially
room,
set up
and it was initially set up for me to be able to do all the repairs and
here, but we realized
here. But we realized pretty early on that having an open fire in the building, it's one thing to have a fireplace that is properly set up, but having an open fire for conditioning the barrels is too much for a distillery to have in house. So I personally do all the repairs here, but anything that is required with firing, conditioning, toasting, charring, we do offsite just because we don't want to.
It's a fair bit of booze here too,
Yeah.
right? So okay, so you see the Pirates of the Caribbean door, you open it up, you go down in the hold, you see these stills, John, and you're like, okay, we gotta do this here.
That's right.
And so remind me how much you knew about making whiskey before you started on this.
I knew nothing about making it. I knew a little bit about drinking it, not a lot. I would never have said I was a whiskey aficionado. I knew what I liked. But I remember thinking, as Cooper said a minute ago, there's some great whiskeys out there, but consumers want not just a great story, but they want authenticity. And here we have a family that was in the business. And it's like Florian 2.0 or whatever. The building is here. No recipe book this time, but the building was a distillery. There's an old illicit still in the basement that people think our family was involved with. How many more things do I have to be given to me for me to be told to go ahead and build a distillery? Oh, you don't know how to make whiskey? Well, one of my other napkin moments was I called the head of brewing for our beer business, Don Bellman, and I said, and who was retired and consulting, and I said, let's go for a cup of coffee or no, it was a drink. I forget.
Beer.
We went for a beer, surprise.
For a change.
And for a change. And so he said, nice to see you again. Why are you meeting me? I said, I think I'd like to build a distillery, and you were such a good brewer and such a good scientist and such a good plant operator and so trustworthy. And I worked with you for 25 years. Would you consider working for me again? And he didn't take very long to say yes. And he went to the effort of getting his distiller's license from Scotland. And he said, what do you want to make? I said, I want to make 3 or 4 kinds of whiskey, but I want the very best whiskey. If our name's going to be on that bottle, we can't have any cutting corners. And he said, well, if you want the best whiskey, you need to give me the best equipment. So, he and I started scouring the world to find the best equipment to make the whiskey that would be good enough for our family name and for our sons to be proud of for the next generation.
So tell me about that process. What did that look like? How did you get it?
Well, with Don doing a lot of the bird dog work, we compiled a list of people in the world who make stills. And, I learned my lesson at the brewery when we started with cream ale, because I liked cream ale. So I discovered after a couple of years that there's a whole lot of people who don't like cream ale, and you can't keep the lights on if Only one guy likes cream ale. So I said, all right, Don, we need to put in equipment that will make several kinds of whiskey, but world quality. And the roads all eventually led back to Scotland. I mean, there were certainly people in China and Germany and Italy and the United States who could make stills. Regrettably, nobody in Canada. And so we started talking to the two major still manufacturers in Scotland, Abercrombie and Forsyth. When I say talking, that's not really true, because we spoke to Abercrombie and they spoke back to us, because we had a relationship still with Guinness, which was part of Diageo. And Diageo was one of the biggest customers for Abercrombie. And so everybody knew everybody else. And they said, sure, you want to call Joe Bloggs here in Stirling and in Scotland. So I started down the road with them. And then they said, you know, we do so much work for Diageo, they just bought us. And they said, okay, you're not working for anybody else now. So I said, well, what am I supposed to do? And they said, well, you better call this company called Forsyth in the Highlands, in Speyside. So I called them. I sent them emails. I sent them letters, and, you know, they were not responding. And eventually I got to the guy, Mr. Forsyth, who like us was second generation. Anyway, I couldn't understand why I didn't want to talk to him. He wasn't rude. He just said, no, I'm not interested. So I guess I bugged him enough that he finally said, look, if you're really intent on talking to me, I'm doing a trade show in Nashville, Tennessee, where, you know, Jack Daniels and all these other guys are. If you're really intent, you can come and see us. So Don and I went down to see him. And he told a story to Quinn later about seeing the whites in my eyes.
Yeah, he did. While I was having the privilege of being able to sit and have lunch with him, he said, I wanted to see the whites of your father's eyes. That was the key point of making sure that he was actually willing to do business with him, which was really interesting.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Right. So that's
It's good thing my eyes were.
you got a good night's sleep that night.
Yeah.
So, but that's a recurring theme, right? And
being in front of people, person to person. And the boys, you know, they didn't go to school to learn it. They just soaked it all up from the kitchen table. And they have observed that being honest with people, sitting across the table from them, learning. I mean, as you and I have said in the first two episodes, you know, you have to figure out what the problem is the other person has and help them solve it. And so long before Quinn talked to Richard Forsyth, I asked him why he didn't want to talk to me. After we overcame the issues, and at least we started to get friendly, I said, why have you been so reluctant to talk to me before sitting here in Nashville? He goes, well, we only made one set of stills for somebody in Canada and they never paid me. So I don't want to do business with Canadians. And it's funny, you know, at the time he lived in the world of Scotch whiskey and still making. And I said, have you ever heard of Sleeman? He goes, no. I said, that's fine. For you to know that we're honorable, why don't you do some research? Go on the website or whatever. And he did, and he came back and he goes, well, it looks like you can probably pay your bills. But he still demanded that we put in the right equipment, that he have a right to come and look at it. But you talk about napkin moments. I was sitting with him and with he and Doan at this Nashville trade conference. And he said, what kind of whiskey do you want to make? And I said, I want to make whiskey that's really easy to drink right out of the gate. I don't want a whiskey that you have to learn to like and you buy one bottle and it's still half full next Christmas. He said, okay, you're going to want blah, blah, blah. And he literally on the back of a napkin, he took his pen out and he drew the stills that are in our still house. He goes, well, you want the lin arm at this angle and it needs to be this long. And he knows the language, but the bulb and all of that stuff. And I said, that's great, but I also want to make bourbon and rye. He goes, well, you can't make it with pot stills. I said, well, I guess I need column stills. He goes, you want me to make those too? I said, yes. So, you know, because of that ability our family has to sit and talk to people and it becomes a conversation. Here's my goal. I'd like you to be part of it. How do we both get something out of this? How can I brag to people that we have the best stills made by the best manufacturer in the world, who is also a family business? There's Richard, his son, I gather his father was in the business. Beverage alcohol for many, many years, maybe many centuries, was a family business. It's only the last 50 or 100 that it's been owned by big corporations.
So let's just a lot of people build businesses, right? There are businesses being built every day. Very
Yeah.
few survive 3 years. Very few.
Rags to riches to
Right.
rags.
And let me ask you, how important is it that you're able to do this with your sons? Like that, I mean, that's gotta be,
I think it's wonderful now. When I started the business, I didn't think that this would be possible because as I said in one of the previous episodes, and they may have a different perspective and we should give them a chance to talk about it. But I wanted my boys and my daughters to be happy at what they do for a living. If you want to be a garbage man, and that's what you like to do, then enjoy it and be the best goddamn garbage man there is. If you want to work with your father, I'm not making a job for you. You have to bring something to the table that I don't have and other people need to bring to the table. So the boys both went off and did other things. And then at the appropriate times in their lives, they came back and said they had some interest in being involved. So right now, looking back on it, I feel incredibly lucky. Like I didn't want to spend any time with my parents at all. These guys actually volunteer to spend time with me. I'm pretty bloody lucky.
what do you think?
I always knew since I was a little boy that I wanted to be involved in the family business, but I never had the expectations of any sort of role. You know, I wasn't looking for the corner office. I wasn't looking for this or that. I just was really proud. The way people would talk to me about the family business, like they seemed excited, right? They went, "Oh, this is so cool."
And this is beyond the time that you're sneaking into the woods.
Yeah. This is like running around at recess in grade school, and somebody's dad, you know, is a Sleeman drinker and talked to their son or their daughter, and now that they're approaching me in recess, going like, "Hey, I heard you're the beer guys. Like, that's so cool." And I went, "Wow, this is a real privilege, you know, to have that." And I understood that. And so being involved was something that I didn't even really think about, but in terms of whether I wanted to or not. However, that being said, I didn't want to set expectations on any sort of role. That was important to me because I knew that one of my dad's things that he's been saying forever is, you know, you surround yourself with professionals, people that are very good at specific roles, and that's how you make a good business, right? And I always thought, what am I good at? What can I do, right? And so I started when I was 19 on the return line at the brewery, you know, pulling cigarettes out of bottles on the returns, and that's where I started. And then swept the floor, and I couldn't be happier, you know what I mean? Because I was there, right? So that's kind of my story. Yeah, real privilege, real blessing. Definitely comes with some pressures, right, to perform. There's definitely that, but I view it as it's a privilege to have those pressures.
That's awesome. What about you, Quinn?
You know what? It's kind of piggybacking off of what Cooper was saying about it's very much so a privilege. It's something that we grew up with. I went to university wanting to be a teacher. Not thinking that I would actually fulfill that dream. I just was kind of thinking that, this is appropriate for my degree. And then midway through, we started the project of actually renovating this building, turning it into what it is now. And on the way in one day, when we were actually discovering that trap door, well, at least I think it was the first time that Dad was showing us that trap door. I asked what his thought process was for barrels, if he had a Cooper specifically. And he said no. He had no idea. So he actually put me in contact with a guy out in Prince Edward County, and I spent a couple hours. I've always liked to work with my hands. Problem is during this whole process, before I knew that I wanted to be a Cooper, and then also eventually become a distiller, I had never even touched a saw.
That's kind of a big deal.
It's good that you still have your fingers.
Right. That's exactly it. So it was really important for me to actually get my hands on something and understand how it works before I actually cut my fingers off or anything like that. But
Still got all
luckily
ten?
enough,
Yes, I do.
I do. I mean, they're a little gross and cut up, but they're okay.
Luckily,
Mr. Forsyth, Richard Forsyth, after we had built all the equipment, he said, we have a Cooper's that we work very closely with in Craigellachie, just outside of where their production facility is. If you're willing, they'd be happy to have free labor. So I was over there for a brief period of time, and they taught me how to do the whole repair process. Because when it comes to making barrels, there is the American side of things, and they make brand new barrels for bourbon typically. And then those bourbon barrels get sent over to Scotland or pretty much anywhere else where their whiskey trade is strong. And they refurbish those barrels for whatever it is whiskey wise that they want to fill it with. So the big thing in Scotland, especially Craigellachie, is they take them apart, they repair them, and then they ship them off to the 50 to 100 distilleries in the local area. And I was lucky enough to be able to train with them for a long time. So that's kind of my story is being able to actually get my hands on. I'm not too big on talking to customers. And,
that's where you and I met, though. We met
go.
on either side of a bottle.
Cooper is fantastic with sales and marketing and pretty much anything when it comes to running and making sure this place is a well-oiled machine. My contribution is just jack of all trades, whatever it is that I can contribute to physically.
Cooper, you talked about the privilege of being in other people's lives, and I think that's something that came from your dad. I mean, you got to see that privilege that, you know, he was given a gift to do something with it, the recipe book. You talked about it was a privilege to be in other people's lives when you were talking about how the kids in the schoolyard would come up to you and talk about, oh my God, you're the beer family, you're the beer family. And you just sort of, you saw that as being a positive. Let me ask you the same question that I asked your dad in episode 2. What does it feel like when you drive by the brewery, when you see a Sleeman's truck or the Sleeman Center downtown here in Guelph? What does that feel like?
Well, when a Sleeman truck drives by, whether it be big or small, I always do one of these, even though they have no idea who I am because I'm just in an unbranded my car. They don't know, but I give them a little wave. Driving down the highway, which is kind of exciting. There's my entire life, there's been Sleeman branded items around me. So the logo of Sleeman is bigger than my last name. And that's also something that, you know, conversations with my dad, well, the three of us, you know, going to football practice, going to school in the morning. I don't know if he meant to drive it home like he did, but he certainly did. Was how Sleeman is bigger than you, Cooper. Sleeman is, there's people that we're putting, you know, they're putting food on their table and feeding their family because of this business. And you need to make sure that you check your ego at the door here, because, you know, if you mess around in any way, you know, that could reflect negatively on somebody that's trying to support their family. And I remember being told that at like a very young age and being like, oh my God, like, can I even say this on the recess playground? But it was something that I really appreciated and reinforced the privilege of it. And how, you know, if there's this opportunity here, Cooper, if you'd like to take it, you don't have to take it. But if you'd like to be involved, you know, you can be involved, even if it's sweeping the floor. You know, that it's, to put it all together is, what does it feel like when I drive by the brewery? It's heartwarming. I mean, my wife now works at the brewery in marketing. My mom worked at the brewery in accounting. It really feels like, even though I didn't do anything, I really feel like part of it, you know, when it was being built. And it's kind of this weight to carry, because you're looking at it going, oh my God. But again, I keep coming back to that word privilege.
How do you feel about it, Quinn? How do you feel?
You know, it's funny. It's funny. It's a little bit different for me because growing up, it was always normal. Like, it's just kind of how your life is, right? But I married someone from Guelph whose family is very ingrained in Guelph. And so now that I live here and I spent all my time here, it's very bizarre seeing your name everywhere, and then also hearing your wife and all of her friends and all of their friends and their family and everything say, like, we see you, everyone, treat you like you're kind of beyond a normal person. Because to me, living somewhere else and not seeing what Guelph is with the Sleeman name, it's normal. It's not something that you run into all the time. But now it's starting to become more and more apparent that it's a big deal. So it's one of those things where you're not as aware of it until it's kind of thrown in your face all the time, right? So
And I mean, I don't want to interrupt, but I think one of the things that is really exciting for the three of us as well is that, I would like my kids, if I'm lucky enough to have kids, to drive by our distillery and feel the same way that I felt as a kid driving by the brewery, and the way I feel now driving by our distillery. Because I remember when the roof was collapsed in on it and itself, and there was tarps everywhere, and it was just a big eyesore, bluntly, downtown Guelph, this big abandoned building. And now I drive by it and people go, and you can recognize it. People go, "Hey, I've been there before." They're talking to me. They don't know who I am. They go, "Hey, have you been to Spring Mill Distillery? They got a great bar downstairs. You should try their cocktails." Like, that just melts my heart,
How do you feel when you hear your boys talk about it that way?
Oh, we talk about privilege and honor. The fact that my boys want to do this, that they enjoy it, they're good at it. And I see the respect they get from people. I mean, Cooper, I'll put words in his mouth, but he has all kinds of stories about people who come up to him, don't know who he is, and say, "Oh, Cooper Sleeman's a really good friend of mine." And he goes, "Really?" So it's kind of nice to see that the boys understand, as Cooper and Quinn said, we just think we're average working people. Other people have a different perception of us. You've spent some time talking to us. I hope that the people who are listening to the podcast get the sense we're just average folks. I mean, we work hard and we happen to have a last name that everybody knows. So we think of ourselves as something different. And then I think about the responsibility that the boys have, and if they have children, the responsibility. I mean, you cannot escape what your last name is. And so they have had to spend their life learning how to deal with it. And sometimes it presents challenges on a security side. And sometimes it means you can't get away with a bloody thing, because as soon as people know who you are, their phones come out and they're taking pictures. And my name is on the liquor license for 4 breweries and this place. And if I screw up, as Cooper said earlier, someone's going to lose their job if they lose the liquor license. So, do you ever let your hair down? Yes, at our cottage. Or we have another home where we are not particularly well known, where if we do something stupid, it's not going to be awful. But we try, we try.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of that. So the reason why I'm asking these questions, John, is you said I need a new challenge. And I think it'd be easy for us all to say the distillery is the challenge. I don't know that that's the challenge.
Yeah.
I think the challenge.
You should be here Sunday.
Yeah.
Oh, you should be here Sunday.
I'm not saying it's not challenging. I'm not saying it's not challenging. But I wonder if it's, you got a book from your Aunt Florian,
Yeah.
along with recipes, and then it was the weight of the history, holding the book and being able to read it and seeing, and you and I talked about this, that the way the book is written, it's like an instruction manual.
Yes.
It was an instruction manual to the next generation
It sure seems
about,
like that.
right? It really does feel like it's really detailed about every single step. And it feels like the challenge that you've taken up is the one that maybe your aunt gave you sort of like in a gift, which was to carry on the tradition, the 7 generations, and picking it back up again and building something that, should have your name on it.
Well, you made an interesting point. When I restarted the brewery, it was not my intention to sell it. Circumstances kind of conspired against me to be able to keep control of that business. And I was presented with options to sell to competitors who made it quite clear that they would shut the brewery down and everybody would lose their job. But don't worry, John, you'll be fine. I said, how do I go down on the floor and tell all the people who have to pay the mortgage that I'm fine and you're out of work? But another reason one of the reasons that I went ahead with what Florian wanted me to do was she kind of said, it's only been one generation holiday. This is what our family has done. Your job is to get this thing back on the rails, like I said earlier. And when it became apparent that I was not going to be able to pass that on to the next generation of Sleemans, people say to me, why did you start a distillery? Certainly a lot of that is the desire to have a legacy. And I'm very lucky that the boys have bought into that and see that they are G6 or G7, whatever it is. And from conversations we've had casually, I sense that they are interested in carrying the business on, and perhaps their children if they feel like it. And it's one of those things where you don't want to make your kids feel like they have no choice, but isn't it nice when they feel like they have no choice? So, yes, do I need a challenge? Did I need a challenge? Yeah. And I sat down and thought about how can I take this desire to create something and make it overlay on Florian's desire to get this family into multi-generational beverage alcohol again. Well, we like to drink wine. I thought about doing something in wine in Italy. I was told pretty quickly that's not going to happen. So, plus I have a lot of friends who are very respected and in the Canadian wine industry. And the last thing I want to do is go into competition with my friends. I was already in the beer business. So if you do wine and spirits and beer, I'm in beer, and I'm not going to do wine. So it's going to be spirits. And our family loves whiskey, and it loves vodka, and it loves beverage alcohol in moderation. So if I wanted to keep in this business and create a legacy, it was going to be building a distillery. The map was laid out for me.
So your father shared Cooper in the, I want to actually, before I do that, the ability to have conversation, that thing that you passed on, the whites of your eyes, you talked about that, right? And how all of you have this, it's a default to, I've got to see you and have a conversation with you. You might not know this, John, but when I met Quinn at the Whiskey Wonderland, he took good care of me. We had some,
Yes.
we had some fun time, and he stashed the bottle and made sure that I got some extra drops, which was fantastic. The cherry bourbon was amazing. And when I said right then, I said, oh, man, I really want to get your dad on my podcast. I really want to have this conversation. And we were like, oh yeah, whatever. And so I emailed you, and then Cooper emailed me, and it wasn't, let's have an email conversation. It's, let's have a conversation. Let's do it on, I want to see you. And I very much had the sense that you needed to see the whites of my eyes. Is that something that you approach now? Is that part of the legacy that your dad has passed down to both of you, that you have?
I gotta say, it's one of the most, and as far as my friends and my wife and their family are concerned, it's the most annoying part of me is I'm a caller. I'm not a texter. I'm not an emailer. I am either FaceTiming them or calling them constantly. So yes, it's something where even if it's the smallest amount of conversation, it has to be done over the phone. And I think that goes for all three of us. It's like, okay, we have to move cars out of the driveway and figure out whatever is going on. It's a phone call. So yeah.
You're chuckling. Why?
I'm just laughing because I never even realized it until right now. Like, I am one of the only guys amongst the guys that I grew up with and went to high school where I call them. Yeah. And, and so that's definitely thing. And then on the business side, which again, I didn't even realize until right now, I have always preferred, before we're going to have business conversations, to have that initial discussion be over phone or Teams or something. And then once I kind of size you up and I go, okay, yeah, this could work, then it's, yeah, no problem. Let's email, boom, 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 boom. Let's do back and forth. Let's get business moving. But, it's an opportunity to just kind of really size you up. And I think
we want to get to know you.
Yeah. And you would want the same for, well, I assume that you would want the same.
Well, and there's also like an advantage to actually, like, you can send someone an email and it may feel petty or whatever it is. You actually know who the person is and how they are when you talk to them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and over the phone or even seeing, as you say, the whites of their eyes, it really makes a difference for understanding who the person you're talking to is.
So what's next, John? What do you?
Hopefully nothing.
Is my wife gonna listen to this?
No.
Well, I mean, we would like to see this company grow and prosper. I would like to support Cooper and Quinn as they take a larger and larger role in growing this business. Cooper keeps encouraging me to take a little more time off. I'm working between 70 and 80 hours a week. I wouldn't mind working 50.
Do you know how to work 50?
Not a bloody clue. But I also know, we were just talking about the importance and the impact of being seen, sitting across from you, talking to you, looking at the whites of your eyes. I've had 4 businesses and an awful lot of employees. And I to this day, I'm always amazed at the impact we have when we walk into a room and we sit and talk face to face with people, whether they're employees, government officials, customers. And it's not that we're great communicators or anything, but we make the effort to sit and talk to people and hear what's going on in their lives. And it helps us form relationships with them. And Cooper has said, why don't you take some more time off? You don't always have to come to the distillery. Well, I come as often as I can because I like to spend time with the people who work here for us. And I want them to know that I do exist, that I have a role to play. I have, I think, enough experience that maybe I can offer an opinion on something that is of concern. Doesn't mean these 2 guys don't know what they're doing, and they are growing every day and taking more responsibility. So what's next is a continuing role here, a continuing role at the brewery. I keep getting asked to stay longer and do more things at the brewery. I enjoy the public respect our family gets because of the integrity that my sons and our family bring to everything we do. I don't want artificial intelligence to play a role in our business. I think there's a reason it's called artificial. I think we need real people to talk to real people. And as long as I can do that and help my sons do that and our customers do that and our employees do that, then my role here, I would like to do some more car racing, but I got some other stuff I got to do first.
That's his 16-year-old dream.
Yeah.
I think this idea of even restoring, in the beverage business is about face to face, right? I mean, drinks are meant to be enjoyed with people you care about. It's an opportunity to slow down. And I think at this time, what's going on in the world, people are lobbing stones at each other from across walls, talking and focusing on difference of opinion, difference of location, difference of ideology, and conflating that to their persona, right?
Yeah.
People are writing people off, canceling people very quickly. And this idea of slowing down in a real way, meeting people face to face, that's a challenge worth undertaking too, right? And I think one of the things that's really brilliant about your story, your family story, is it's always been about defying expectations and doing things to bring people together. Guinness was never available here. Well, why would anybody want that, right? Bringing a still design that wasn't available here, taking a recipe book out of a cellar and turning it into something, right? These challenges were always immense, and your family has stood for something through all those challenges. I think the timing is really great. How do you is that something on your radar at all right now? How relevant it is to today's time?
Well, one of the reasons I wanted to get into this industry is because it, as you say, it tends to bring people together. It's generally something that people enjoy. It brings, for the most part, happiness to at least to those that use it properly. And so that means that we are constantly providing and being surrounded with good things that people enjoy. And even if you can't stand the politics of the guy you're sitting with, you have a beer. I mean, we have a place in the country, and there are local bars, and the local farm boys go and play hockey and they beat the crap out of each other. But you know what they do afterwards? They go to the same bar and they put their arms around each other and they have a beer. We have a rugby team that comes here, and you know how rugby guys are, their noses out here and their ears are like this and they beat the crap out of each other. And then they come here and they all drink together and they sing songs. What we do for a living is generally, we're not solving Middle East war. We're not coming up with a cure for cancer, but we are providing something that brings people together and seems to make people happy. And it's something that makes us proud of what we do. It makes people love to spend time with us. They go, hey, I met the Sleeman guys. They're really cool and they got great whiskey. Those are positive comments instead of disparaging ones. And so we like to surround ourselves with an industry and work at companies that make people happy, make us happy. Every once in a while, we make the bankers happy, not that often, because they're a difficult bunch to make happy.
Especially in this country.
Yes. But you know what? I don't wake up in the morning and go, I hate to go to work. No, I wake up in the morning and go, you should have gone to bed earlier last night. But I don't ever regret what I do for a living. And I don't think these boys do either.
There's an advantage to what whiskey forces you to understand, and it's slowing down. As much as you want things to be on the shelf right away, you have to wait. And so on top of that, it forces you to think, okay, what's going to happen 3-4 years from now? And how do I set that up for success now? So yes, it is a very much so like it's a slow process, but it allows you to kind of take your time and understand how things work between now and then. So I see an advantage in that.
Yeah, Quinn's definitely the most patient out of all this. He always has been. He always has
Yeah.
been. No, I was thinking while Quinn was just talking there about, your question to my dad, what's next? And I thought I kind of asked myself that question as he was answering. And I think both Quinn and I, and all three of us, would love nothing more than to see this business become the success that it was designed to be. It's been a very challenging 6 years. Everyone goes, oh, the Sleeman guys, so lucky, having a great time. No, this has been really difficult.
Yeah.
It's been really hard. Hard on the staff that are here. We've pushed our staff very hard. Hey, next year's going to be our year, right? Next year's going to be our year. We've been saying that for 6 years. My mom is like, what are you guys doing? Right? Because we're doing this as a family. We're not leaning on some big corporation that's just dumping money into this. We're doing this as a family. And so it's been hard. And we, in the last year have really started to gain momentum, right? Our liquids are getting older thanks to the patience of sitting and looking at it for years. We're starting to deliver some really unique, wonderful whiskeys, award-winning Canadian whiskeys, right? We had 2 gold winners this year, and every single whiskey we made won an award at the Canadian National Whiskey Awards.
One of which you got a chance to try.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we do see the light at the end of the tunnel, but there was a couple of years there in COVID, then the interest rates in the economy and all of those sorts of things where we almost couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. And so, when Dad was saying, I wish I went to bed earlier last night, there were a lot of sleepless nights.
Yeah.
How am I going to make this happen? Which goes back to one of the comments from one of the earlier episodes, where it's like, say yes and then figure out how to do it. I think we all live our life that way. And sometimes, it drives my wife crazy. She's like, you're not even thinking. You're just saying yes. And it's like, yeah, but I'm confident in my ability to figure it out. Right? This is a good opportunity for us, whether it be my personal endeavors or business. This is a good opportunity for us. And people go, well, how are you going to do it? I'm like, I don't know yet, but I'm going to get there. And I think that's important as well.
And you're not going to quit, right?
We have no option.
Yeah.
Quitting? No, never.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel bad about that because I know the struggles these guys have gone through during the last 6, 8, 10 years. And if they were working for another company, they would have the ability to say, this is crazy. I quit. I'm not going through this shit every day. And then they look at me and go, I don't have a bloody choice.
Yeah.
And I just can't imagine not being in business with my sons and this being a legacy business for the next generation.
This is a great thing about wine, right? And they talk about wine, and the best wines, when you go and visit France, are on cliffs that somehow this grape, this vine is hanging on for dear life. And they're not allowed to water it. They're not allowed to fertilize it. It just survives. And that's the best wine. And that challenge builds character. And, you know, we've talked about your challenges that have built the character of the Sleeman companies. Talked about how both of you have been through the challenges, and that's built the character of this company and this place that we're in right now. It's just been an honor to share that time with you. Thank you, John.
Oh, we're
Thank you,
delighted that you wanted to speak with us. Thank you.
Thank you.